Hello and welcome to day 92 of the Not Alone Today chronological Bible reading plan. Today we'll be reading 2 Samuel chapters 2 to 4 using the Good News translation.
2 Samuel chapter 2. After this, David asked the Lord, "Shall I go and take control of one of the towns of Judah?"
Yes, the Lord answered.
"Which one?" David asked.
Hebron, the Lord said. So David went to Hebron, taking with him his two wives, Ahinoam, who was from Jezreel, and Abigail, Nabal's widow, who was from Carmel. He also took his men and their families, and they settled in the towns around Hebron. Then the men of Judah came to Hebron and anointed David as king of Judah.
When David heard that the people of Jabesh in Gilead had buried Saul, he sent some men there with the message, "May the Lord bless you for showing your loyalty to your king by burying him. And now may the Lord be kind and faithful to you. I too will treat you well because of what you have done. Be strong and brave. Saul your king is dead, and the people of Judah have anointed me as their king."
The commander of Saul's army, Abner, son of Ner, had fled with Saul's son, Ishbosheth, across the Jordan to Mahanaim. There Abner made Ishbosheth king of the territories of Gilead, Asher, Jezreel, Ephraim, and Benjamin, and indeed over all Israel. He was 40 years old when he was made king of Israel, and he ruled for 2 years.
But the tribe of Judah was loyal to David, and he ruled in Hebron over Judah for 7.5 years.
Abner and the officials of Ishbosheth went from Mahanaim to the city of Gibeon. Joab, whose mother was Jeruai, and David's other officials met them at the pool, where they all sat down, one group on one side of the pool and the other group on the opposite side. Abner said to Joab, "Let's have some of the young men from each side fight an armed contest."
"All right," Joab answered.
So 12 men, representing Ishbosheth and the tribe of Benjamin, fought 12 of David's men. Each man caught his opponent by the head and plunged his sword into the opponent's side, so that all 24 of them fell down dead together. So that place in Gibeon is called Field of Swords.
Then a furious battle broke out, and Abner and the Israelites were defeated by David's men. The 3 sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Asahel, who could run as fast as the wild deer, started chasing Abner, running straight for him. Abner looked back and said, "Is that you, Asahel?"
"Yes," he answered.
"Stop chasing me," Abner said. "Run after one of the soldiers and take what he has." But Asahel kept on chasing him. Once more, Abner said to him, "Stop chasing me. Why force me to kill you? How could I face your brother Joab?" But Asahel would not quit. So Abner, with a backward thrust of his spear, struck him through the stomach, so that the spear came out at his back. Asahel dropped to the ground dead, and everyone who came to the place where he was lying stopped and stood there.
But Joab and Abishai started out after Abner, and at sunset they came to the hill of Ammah, which is to the east of Giah, on the road to the wilderness of Gibeon. The men from the tribe of Benjamin gathered around Abner again and took their stand on top of a hill. Abner called out to Joab, "Do we have to go on fighting forever? Can't you see that in the end there will be nothing but bitterness? We are your relatives. How long would it be before you order your men to stop chasing us?"
"I swear by the living God," Joab answered, "that if you had not spoken, my men would have kept on chasing you until tomorrow morning." Then Joab blew the trumpet as a signal for his men to stop pursuing the Israelites, and so the fighting stopped.
Abner and his men marched through the Jordan Valley all that night. They crossed the Jordan River, and after marching all the next morning, they arrived back at Mahanaim.
When Joab gave up the chase, he gathered all his men and found that 19 of them were missing. In addition to Asahel, David's men had killed 360 of Abner's men from the tribe of Benjamin. Joab and his men took Asahel's body and buried it in the family tomb at Bethlehem. Then they marched all night, and at dawn, arrived back at Hebron.
Chapter 3. The fighting between the forces supporting Saul's family and those supporting David went on for a long time. As David became stronger and stronger, his opponents became weaker and weaker.
The following 6 sons, in order of their birth, were born to David at Hebron: Amnon, whose mother was Ahinoam from Jezreel; Chileab, whose mother was Abigail, Nabal's widow from Carmel; Absalom, whose mother was Maacah, the daughter of King Talmai of Geshur; Adonijah, whose mother was Agith; Shephatiah, whose mother was Abital; Ithream, whose mother was Eglah. All of these were born in Hebron.
As the fighting continued between David's forces and the forces loyal to Saul's family, Abner became more and more powerful among Saul's followers.
One day, Ishbosheth, son of Saul, accused Abner of sleeping with Saul's concubine Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. This made Abner furious. "Do you think that I would betray Saul? Do you really think I'm serving Judah?" he exclaimed. "From the very first I have been loyal to the cause of your father Saul, his brothers and his friends, and I have kept you from being defeated by David. Yet today you find fault with me about a woman." The Lord promised David that he would take the kingdom away from Saul and his descendants and will make David king of both Israel and Judah, from one end of the country to the other. Now may God strike me dead if I don't make this come true. Ishbosheth was so afraid of Abner that he could not say a word.
Abner sent messengers to David, who at that time was at Hebron, to say, "Who is going to rule this land? Make an agreement with me, and I will help you win all Israel over to your side."
"Good," David answered. "I will make an agreement with you on one condition. You must bring Saul's daughter Michal to me when you come to see me." And David also sent messengers to Ishbosheth to say, "Give me back my wife Michal. I paid 100 Philistine foreskins in order to marry her." So Ishbosheth had her taken from her husband Paltiel, son of Laish. Paltiel followed her all the way to the town of Bahurim, crying as he went. But when Abner said, "Go back home," he did.
Abner went to the leaders of Israel and said to them, "For a long time you have wanted David to be your king. Now here is your chance. Remember that the Lord has said, 'I will use my servant David to rescue my people Israel from the Philistines and from all of their older enemies.'" Abner spoke also to the people of the tribe of Benjamin, and then went to Hebron to tell David what the people of Benjamin and of Israel had agreed to do.
When Abner came to David at Hebron with 20 men, David gave a feast for them. Abner told David, "I will go now and win all Israel over to your majesty. They will accept you as king, and then you will get what you have wanted and will rule over the whole land." David gave Abner a guarantee of safety and sent him on his way.
Later on, Joab and David's other officials returned from a raid, bringing a large amount of loot with them. Abner, however, was no longer there at Hebron with David because David had sent him away with a guarantee of safety. When Joab and his men arrived, he was told Abner had come to King David and had been sent away with a guarantee of safety. So Joab went to the king and said to him, "What have you done? Abner came to you. Why did you let him go like that? He came here to deceive you and to find out everything you do and everywhere you go. Surely you know that."
After leaving David, Joab sent messengers to get Abner, and they brought him back from Sirah well. But David knew nothing about it. When Abner arrived in Hebron, Joab took him aside at the gate, as though he wanted to speak privately with him, and there he stabbed him in the stomach. And so Abner was murdered, because he had killed Joab's brother Asahel. When David heard the news, he said, "The Lord knows that my subjects and I are completely innocent of the murder of Abner. May the punishment for it fall on Joab and all his family. In every generation may there be some man in his family who has gonorrhea, or a dreaded skin disease, or is fit only to do a woman's work, or is killed in battle, or doesn't have enough to eat." So Joab and his brother Abishai took revenge on Abner for killing their brother Asahel in the battle at Gibeon.
Then David ordered Joab and his men to tear their clothes, wear sackcloth, and mourn for Abner. And at the funeral, King David himself walked behind the coffin. Abner was buried at Hebron, and the king wept aloud at the grave, and so did all the people. David sang this lament for Abner.
Why did Abner have to die like a fool? His hands were not tied and his feet were not bound. He died like someone killed by criminals. And the people wept for him again.
All day long, the people tried to get David to eat something, but he made a solemn promise. May God strike me dead if I eat anything before the day is over. They took note of this and were pleased. Indeed, everything the king did pleased the people. All of David's people and all the people in Israel understood that the king had no part in the murder of Abner. The king said to his officials, "Don't you realize that this day a great leader in Israel has died? Even though I am the king chosen by God, I feel weak today. The sons of Zeruiah are too violent for me. May the Lord punish these criminals as they deserve."
Chapter 4. When Saul's son Ishbosheth heard that Abner had been killed in Hebron, he was afraid, and all the people of Israel were alarmed. Ishbosheth had 2 officers who were leaders of raiding parties, Baanah and Rechab, sons of Rimmon, from Beeroth in the tribe of Benjamin. Beeroth is counted as part of Benjamin. Its original inhabitants had fled to Gittaim, where they had lived ever since.
Another descendant of Saul was Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth, who was 5 years old when Saul and Jonathan were killed. When the news of their death came from the city of Jezreel, his nurse picked him up and fled, but she was in such a hurry that she dropped him, and he became crippled.
Rechab and Baanah set out for Ishbosheth's house and arrived there about noon, while he was taking his midday rest. The woman at the door had become drowsy while she was sifting wheat and had fallen asleep. So Rechab and Baanah slipped in. Once inside, they went to Ishbosheth's bedroom, where he was sound asleep, and killed him. Then they cut off his head and took it with them, and walked all night through the Jordan Valley. They presented the head to King David at Hebron and said to him, "Here is the head of Ishbosheth, the son of your enemy Saul, who tried to kill you. Today the Lord has allowed your majesty to take revenge on Saul and his descendants."
David answered them, "I take a vow by the living Lord, who has saved me from all dangers. The messenger who came to me at Ziklag and told me of Saul's death thought he was bringing good news. I seized him and had him put to death. That was the reward I gave him for his good news. How much worse would it be for evil men who murder an innocent man asleep in his own house? I will now take revenge on you for murdering him and will wipe you off the face of the earth." David gave the order, and his soldiers killed Rechab and Baanah and cut off their hands and feet, which they hung up near the pool in Hebron. They took Ishbosheth's head and buried it in Abner's tomb there at Hebron. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. By way of quick recap, we have read 3 chapters, progressing from where we left off yesterday in 2 Samuel chapter 1. As of that chapter, we saw that Saul and Jonathan were dead, and David had mourned their deaths. And the people of Jabesh in Gilead had retrieved Saul's mutilated body, burnt it, and gave his bones and that of his sons befitting burial. Now in chapter 2, we saw how David was made king of Judah, having inquired of the Lord whether to take control of any of the towns. The Lord answered and said he should take control of Hebron. But meanwhile, Ishbosheth, son of Saul, was made king over all the other tribes, the northern tribes that would generally be referred to as Israel. So while David was king in Judah, Ishbosheth was king in Israel. But we're told of a war between Israel and Judah, between David's officials led by Joab and the Israeli army led by Abner. And it led on to a stalemate in which 24 people died needlessly. In chapter 3, we were told about David's family, how he continued to grow stronger and stronger, while his opponents, the people from Israel, on Ishbosheth's side, continued to become weaker and weaker. We're given a list of David's sons, which were born to 6 different women in that chapter. And then upon the accusation of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, against Abner of sleeping with Saul's concubine, Abner felt so insulted that he defected and began to pay loyalty to David. Eventually, having murdered one of Joab's siblings, Joab found an occasion to retaliate and kill Abner in return. David lamented this and mourned greatly for Abner, placing a curse on Joab and his descendants. In chapter 4, we saw how Ishbosheth himself was murdered by 2 of David's men, Rechab and Baanah, and they brought the head of Ishbosheth to David, thinking he will be pleased. David was not pleased that these people have done an act of murder, and he also gave orders for them to be murdered. And so Rechab and Baanah were also killed. And that's the point where we are in the story. Let's go back to chapter 2 and offer some reflections. What stood out to you?
Verse 27 stood out to me, in that it's important to communicate when there's conflict. If Abner had not spoken to Joab to just ask, why are you chasing us? We're relatives, the war wouldn't have stopped. And the instruction, what I got from this is that when there's a conflict, instead of my normal stance to ignore the person or give a wide berth to the person, or give a wide gap between me and the person, like set boundaries, it'd be actually good to communicate and just ask, what's up, what's going on, why are you doing this? And then see if resolution can come from there. And it's also mostly important to inquire of God, like David did at the start, on which land would he rule over. And I found those 2 instructive.
It's interesting that you've highlighted exactly the same 2 things I was going to highlight. I actually I highlighted verse 26, but of course leading on to verse 27 that you quoted, and then of course verse 1 to spotlight the need for us to indeed inquire of the Lord. That's one thing that has kept coming through in the story of David. He did the same in 1 Samuel 30 in the Ziklag episode. But in verse 26, the words of Abner are actually quite instructive, because it says, do we have to go on fighting forever? Can't you see that in the end there will be nothing but bitterness? And I think that is a very apt thing to say and to understand when it comes to this whole issue of conflicts and disagreements. And I mean, at the end, what does it yield? There will be nothing but bitterness. And it's been demonstrated. They said 12 of our men, fight 12 of your men. Let's see who wins. At the end of the day, there was no winner because all the 24 were dead.
It's quite, I don't know why they did that.
The cycle just continues like that until, of course, that communication then happened in 27, and at least for a while, their fighting did cease in that sense. Chapter 3, anything stood out to you?
What stood out to me is how that David's 2 wives were often mentioned with their full names and where they're from. Yeah. Most times when we read about wives, we just read wives or mother. But we've never, it's quite interesting that when they want to say David and his 2 wives, and David took his 2 wives, they would say, I'm from Jezreel, and Abigail, neighbor's widow from Carmel. I found that interesting.
I found it interesting that where did he have the opportunity and the time and the space to have married 6 women while he was busy running away from Saul? When did it happen that this shepherd boy that was a 17-year-old fighting Goliath has suddenly become the husband of 6 women, at least as of verse 2, between verse 2 and 5, We're told of Ahinoam, Abigail, Maacah, Haggith, Abital, Eglah, and these were not random marriages. These were strategic because this one is the daughter of this king, that one is the daughter of that leader.
Maybe that's why they kept mentioning Jezreel.
Possibly.
Because Jezreel was now one of the land that came to him, one of the territories.
Yeah. And so I'm struck about that. And of course we know that there are still more. There was Michal that will also be mentioned later on in the chapter, who he married legally, and then of course Saul, out of his cantankerousness, gave Michal to someone else along the line, and now David is negotiating to have Michal brought back to him. And Michal, for whatever reason, did not hesitate as well, just like Mrs. Abigail, to jump into the caravan and come to the handsome King David. Whereas her husband was crying like a baby until they shouted at him, "Go back!" And the man
He's not crying like a baby. Imagine, what if she had just given birth?
What if she has just been giving birth?
Yeah. What if that might be the reason why he's crying after her? Yeah. What if he loves her so much? They took your wife from you, won't you cry?
But they gave him someone else's wife to begin with, and he is aware of that fact.
And for years, they've been together. So affection, let me not read too much into it.
Yeah, but the other thing that stood out to me is verse 1, that David became stronger and stronger. His opponents became weaker and weaker, and that seems to be what is then spelled out in the rest of the chapter to help us to see how God continues to prosper David, while his opponents, in this case, Ishbosheth and everyone under him, continue to be weaker and weaker because of various internal fractures that continued to happen within their camp, until eventually even Abner was murdered and buried. Chapter 4, anything stood out to you?
The part that stood out to me is verse 4. When the nurse dropped Mephibosheth, I feel sorry for her. I feel as though she's the victor here. But most sermons that I've listened to, especially in Nigerian context, they paint the nurse as though she was careless, she was no wise. Then they will raise prayer point that this kind of a person should never come to our lives, people that are careless. And I thought to myself, it was during a time of war. They had killed the king and his sons. She rescued the baby and fled with him. It was in the hurry that she dropped him. It was an accident.
Yeah.
And the resulting outcome was that he became crippled, but it wasn't intentional for her to have done that. So I think she was brave in actually picking the boy to run with him, because she knew what would happen if he remained there. And for that, she should be praised, because if she hadn't saved him, David would not have remembered him enough to bring him to his table, to sit at his table with him.
Indeed. It's interesting her name was not mentioned, but she did act bravely. David is just a curious character in terms of how you never can tell what you do to please him. So Rechab and Baanah again thought they were doing David a favor. Here is David ruling over just Hebron. They know that God has promised him to rule over the entire nation of Israel. And they know that the only person standing in the way of that at the time was Ishbosheth. They went into Ishbosheth's house, killed him, cut off his head, brought his head to David. But of course, again, rather than David rejoicing, he also instructs his people, his soldiers, to kill Rechab and Baanah for what they have just done. So when we hear the whole idea of David being, quote and unquote, a man after God's heart, it's difficult to, especially seeing all these gory details of battles here and there and things he has done, it's difficult to fully understand. But maybe the Psalms help us to actually see more into his heart than the narrative of the story and the polygamous tendency of marrying 6 women or 7 within so short a while in his life. But indeed, he has this sense of justice that is very profound and very aligned in that sense to God's justice. such as is easily misconstruable in the narrative. But this is just the beginning. We will be turning the page again on day 93, when we'll continue in the story to see David eventually becoming the king over the entire nation of Israel, both the northern and the southern kingdoms. But till then, just remember,
you're not alone.
Today, God bless you.
God bless you.